while back, two of my friends were having a debate on whether there's such a thing as a selfless good deed. And although I wanted to hear from my other friends, Ross, Rachel, Monica, and Chandler, it was Joey's argument over Phoebe's that really got me thinking. Now, his premise was that there is no such thing as a selfless good deed because at its core, if you're doing something good for somebody else, you probably feel pretty good about it. Therefore, it can't truly be selfless. Well, as a founder of a nonprofit, that kind of got me thinking. And as I advanced through my volunteer career, I went back to that when I founded my nonprofit because I was struggling to recruit volunteers and maintain volunteers. And if what he says is true, then my approach, that you should be doing this because it's the right thing to do, might not be the most effective approach. So, when I went through some of my most effective volunteers and some of the most effective volunteers informally talking to them, what I found is that most volunteers, the most effective volunteers we had a very distinct reason for volunteering. They had a very distinct motivation. They volunteered with a purpose. They volunteered selfishly. Now, I know that selfish and volunteer aren't usually used in the same breath, and I'm not saying that volunteers are selfish or that you should be truly self-serving. But what if I told you that by taking a more selfish approach to your volunteer experience, you could get more out of it personally, professionally, and could make a deeper impact on the nonprofit you serve? So be selfish and volunteer. Now, for me, as he said, volunteering started when I was just a wee Catholic schoolboy. And so it's kind of been ingrained in our DNA that we should give back to the community. But as I look back on my volunteer experience, I realized that something changed in 2005 that kind of flipped a switch and changed my mindset on what volunteering should be and could be. In 2005, hurricane-force winds devastated the Gulf states. Hurricane Katrina was one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history, and I, like maybe many of you, watched on TV as people were being helicoptered off of their roofs and taken to safety, as people were bused from devastating conditions to deplorable conditions in the Superdome, and as animals were left to fend for themselves in what soon became known as the Black Water. Now, I wanted to make a difference and I wanted to participate, but I was several states away. Didn't really know how to go about it. Donating really wasn't an option at that time. So, like maybe many of you, when you feel so strongly and passionately about something, sometimes the minutia of life gets to you, and that thing you felt so strongly about takes a back seat. And that kind of started happening to me, but I was still seeing it every night on TV. Fortunately for me, a call came. An animal welfare agency that I had worked with in the past had called me up and asked if I'd like to go to New Orleans to help with the animal relief effort. This was my chance. I finally got to do what I wanted to do for the past week, and that's get into the thick of it and help out. Now, you might be asking yourself, why you? It was a past employer. I really wasn't an animal person. I wasn't a veterinarian. I wasn't a vet tech. But what they told me was that I had a certain skill set that wasn't on premise at that point in time. And that skill set was to help organize and implement resources. See, the animals, when they came in from the Black Water, had plenty of veterinarians and vet techs and volunteers to help them save these animals. But the real challenge came when all these animals kept coming in and they kept having to be kenneled. And getting all their needs on a daily basis taken care of was the biggest challenge. Event management to the rescue. Now, I had taken care of animals and taken care of a whole bunch of different nonprofits from an event management perspective. I ran galas and walks and all those kinds of things. But when they sent me to New Orleans, and they sent me and a few other people with event management experience there, we were each placed in charge of a huge equestrian barn. And in that barn housed hundreds of animals that were in kennels. And our mission was to get every animal their physical needs taken care of within a 24-hour period. Now, they had already been on the ground for more than 2 weeks, and they still couldn't do this. So when I got to my barn, I had a set group of assets, including volunteers. There was one group of volunteers in particular, and I knew they were a group because they all had the same color shirts on. They had come in from another state, And their main purpose for being there was to console the animals out of the devastation. And that's a great thing. Mental is just as important as the physical. But at that time, our mission was to take care of the physical, not the mental. And some of the things that they were doing, even though it was great for those individual animals, was actually contrary to our mission. So I did something that I have never done before. I fired them. Now I know, but there's a happy ending, I promise. So the volunteers that I did had already been on the ground for a few weeks, so they knew a lot of other volunteers that were like-minded and had the same motivation that we did. One woman in particular was a veterinarian's wife that came in from another state, and she was a godsend. She really helped us get the volunteers that we needed and helped develop the processes and procedures that we could get all the animals in our barn taken care of within a 24-hour period. We were the first to do so. Later that night, we shared with everybody how to do it and how we got it accomplished, and within just a couple days, all the animals in the Lamar-Dixon Expo Center were taken care of, all their needs met within a 24-hour period, and here's the happy ending. Those volunteers that I had fired came back, some of them, to my barn, and they were able to accomplish their motivation for volunteering because of the policies and processes that we had put in place. They were able to console the animals, be able to walk them and pet them and play with them and feed them and water them. So they got what they wanted. Now, it was tough. It wasn't easy. And I wondered to myself as I looked back on that experience, why was I so successful in my experience? I hadn't been so successful in a lot of different opportunities that I had in the volunteering aspect. Why was I so dedicated, even changing tires on big trucks, which I had never done before? Barely sleeping, if any, having any sleep. Why was I so creative, so collaborative, such an effective leader? Well, as I look back, I realized it was my motivation for being there. My motivation wasn't to help the animals. I had already said I just wanted to help when I was watching it on TV. Animal people, it really didn't matter to me. But the animal relief effort was my avenue to help. And my motivation was to be a part of history. I'd watched it on TV for so many nights. I just wanted to be a part of that history, and I was. And later, those winds of change blew me to Hurricane Rita in Texas and back to Florida for Hurricane Wilma. And then through that entire experience, I was hired for a job out in Colorado. It was a dream job, making more money than I'd ever made. It's not a lot because it's still the nonprofit sector. But it was a great job, and I gained so much more knowledge and experience over doing that. It later led to the founding of my own nonprofit, and it led to my social entrepreneurship journey by meeting some people in the startup community in Denver. Volunteering in the United States is in a decade-long decline. And if I can benefit from volunteering, why are less people volunteering? We have lost 4% of the population volunteering from 2005 to 2015. Now, what does 4% look like? It's 13 million less people volunteering in the United States. And if we got back just that 4%, we could add, on average, 8 people to every single nonprofit in the United States. Now, as a founder of a nonprofit, I can tell you what I can do with 8 people would change my nonprofit in a huge way. But did you know that volunteers give 2 times more than non-volunteers? So there's another issue in the nonprofit sector that can be taken care of. There are 55% of the nonprofits in the U.S. are considered small with an annual budget under $1 million. Yet they account for just 3% of the revenue that comes into the nonprofit sector, from programs and services, from individual and corporate donors, and from grants and other funding sources. On the flip side, there are just 3% of nonprofits that account for over 73% of the funding. Now, this isn't a conversation regarding big versus small or anything like that. But when we're talking about your volunteer experience and leveraging your volunteer experience, the big guys can afford to hire people. It's these small organizations in your own backyard that can't. And as I said, volunteers donate 2 times more. So you can add your time and your money to these smaller organizations and help. Now, this isn't a conversation or a talk about volunteering for volunteering's sake. These are great reasons to volunteer. But I already said, sometimes that's not really an effective approach. So this is about you. What benefits can you get out of volunteering? 76% of people that volunteer say that they're healthier for volunteering. There's one study that took into account volunteers, and they said that people that volunteer every 2 to 4 weeks are 16% happier in their lives. And they equated that to going from a $20,000 a year income to a $75,000 a year income. Now, other benefits are that it can combat stress and depression, can increase confidence, can increase creativity and mental acuity, can even decrease blood pressure, although not with me right now. And there's one study that even says it can reduce the risk of heart disease. Now, with so many of these benefits, why aren't more people volunteering? What's the number one people that don't volunteer? I bet most of you came to the same conclusion in your mind right now. And maybe you've used it before, I know I have. And that's time. Time or lack of time is the number one excuse that people don't volunteer. And if we look at that logically, then we would say that the people that do volunteer must have more time on their hands. But is that true? Do you know what the average volunteer looks like in the United States? Well, she is married, educated, employed, and has children under the age of 18. Now, if that's not a busy person, I kind of don't know what is. But as Ben Franklin said, if you want something done, ask a busy person. You can have everything in life that you want if you just help enough other people get what they want. And if we look at the average volunteer and we say that a busy person can volunteer, they volunteer because it's important to them. And if we increase the importance of volunteering in our own lives, then we would be able to volunteer in a more effective and a more efficient way. And it wouldn't just benefit us, it would benefit the nonprofit that we're serving because we'd be more dedicated to our own goals, and the nonprofit would reap the rewards. There was a study done I know we're in the shadow of the Air Force Academy, but there was a study done through West Point where they looked at 14 years of data on cadets, and they followed them through their entire stint at West Point and into their careers. And they found that those that had intrinsic motivations for being there, those that had internal goals for being at West Point, were 20% more likely not just to graduate, but 20% more likely to succeed in their careers. On the flip side of that, those with external motivations, whether it be family pressure or pressure to go into the military for some reason, they were actually less likely to graduate, let alone succeed in their careers. Now, I have an example from my own nonprofit that kind of highlights what Zig Ziglar said. I had a marketing committee that I would say arguably was the most effective committee I've ever had in my organization. And this committee was made up mainly of young professional females that had marketing backgrounds. And one volunteer in particular came to us because she found us online. She was new to the area, and she liked our job description. So as I interviewed her, I asked her why she wanted to volunteer with us. And she had two reasons. One was to meet new people. She was new to the area. And the second one was that she wanted to utilize her skills and develop new ones so that once she was ready to look for a job locally, that she could acquire a job. Now, to this day, that whole entire group are still friends. And she accomplished what she wanted to do. When she was ready to look for a job, she listed us as a reference. Now, I'm not saying it's because of us, but the only company that called us as part of that reference is the company that offered her the job. And now she works for a large, huge international company, headquarters in Denver. And as a matter of fact, she even helped one of those other women from that committee get a job with that same company, and they both still work there today. So what's your motivation? Flip the script on your volunteer experience. Figure out what you want first. Then go and look for the opportunities that can fulfill your own needs. And then when you do that, and you're a little bit more selfish, the nonprofit will benefit even more. So what's your motivation? Is it to do good? Be selfish and volunteer. Find an organization that you care about, talk with their executive team, and figure out how you can help advance their organization as an entire organization. Sit on committees, special projects, help the staff and volunteers that are already there do their jobs better, whatever it takes. Get involved. Do you want to feel good? Be selfish, volunteer. Find a cause that you feel really passionately about and that you want to actually touch and feel to feel good. Get involved with elderly by talking to them in programs that allow you to do that. Get involved with animals, walking dogs, or taking care of them. Get involved with kids by tutoring or mentoring them. Get involved. Do you want to meet people? Be selfish and volunteer. Get involved with the special events committees. Get involved in the day-to-day activities that help move these events forward. Sit at the front desk where you're seeing volunteers all the time and seeing staff and potential clients coming in. Get involved. Do you want to learn how to pour the perfect beer? Be selfish and volunteer. If you want to learn a new skill or add a skill to your current resume, or you want to share knowledge or learn new knowledge, you can do it through volunteering. Anything you can do in the business community, you can do in the volunteer community, in the nonprofit sector. It's perfect for students. It's perfect for people that want to advance their lives. Whatever it is, get involved. Do you want to advance your career or your life? Be selfish and volunteer. If you want to advance your career, there is a great networking opportunity when you work with nonprofits. This is a perfect example. You can meet a lot of new people that may be in occupations that, or potential clients, or other ways that you can meet new people and network to advance your career. And how many times have we heard that when you find your purpose, go look for your purpose and then live your purpose? Well, how do you find your purpose when you work from 9 to 5 and you got kids and spouses and all those kinds of things? You can find your purpose in volunteering, everything from accounting to volunteer management and everything in between. You want to reduce guilt? Just go get therapy. Write a big fat check to a local charity and get involved that way. But no matter what your motivation, volunteer with a purpose. Be selfish and watch the ripple effects of your selfish good deed. Thank you.